Apex has been out now for a week, believe it or not, and in that time I feel as though I've got a pretty good grasp on what weapons are good and what weapons you should stay clear of. We've also got the damage stats now thanks to a community member. And with so much to learn in the game, I thought it would be a good idea to let you guys know what weapons you are best to keep a hold of, what attachments you need to make them work, and when you should use them. I probably should mention though that the best weapons and each person's favourite guns are very subjective and it depends on your playstyle. One of the best things with Apex is that there really are multiple weapons that can work in different circumstances, but in this video these are the ones that I really prefer using. I'm also only going to cover the base guns in the game and not the Kraber or the Mastiff, which are the golden guns that you can only get from drops. Those guns are just straight upgrades and honestly you'd be mad to not pick either one of them up if you get a chance. The only way I wouldn't pick up a Kraber is if it was really late game and the zone was very close range, say in a couple of buildings. The Mastiff on the other hand is just immensely strong, always pick it up. Now there are definitely a few guns that I personally would say are the best in the game at the moment. Right now I'd put my top 4 as the Wingman, the Peacekeeper, the R301 and the Longbow. There are some others in this conversation too, but let's start with these first. The Wingman, just an absolute monster, but you need good aim. The kills you can get with this gun are downright dirty if you can nail your shots. It's a revolver and so you've got a reasonably limited ammo pool, but it does 45 damage with a body shot, which is incredibly strong, and a headshot, well, that can do up to 90 damage. If you're accurate with this thing, it's deadly. There are a few attachments that you really need though to make a huge difference. First of all, extended mags. You start off with only 6 rounds in the mag, but depending on the rarity of the extended mag, you can increase that all the way up to 12. A standard grey mag takes the capacity up slightly, then the blue mag by slightly more, and then the legendary all the way up to the maximum of 12. That's double the initial capacity. And when you can potentially do 45 to 90 damage a shot, that makes a huge difference. There's more though. There's a special hop-up attachment that you are really going to want to obtain with this gun, Skull Piercer Rifling. What does it do? Well, it only increases the damage that you do with headshots. If 90 wasn't enough for you, then with the attachment you're going to be way more deadly. The thing is that even the base Wingman is extremely strong in the right hands. The only other attachment that you need, I think, is the sights, but this absolutely comes down to personal preference. The basic optic I think is more than good enough to land some sweet headshots. The gold digital threat though is also a really good sight if you manage to find it. One last thing though, the Wingman utilizes heavy ammo, so be sure to hold on to any that you find if you want to use it for a long period of time. When you've got this, go for the head, go for the ambush, and you'll quickly chunk people's health down. There is one other gun that can use the Skull Piercer Rifling attachment, and it also happens to be a very strong weapon, but it's not a pistol this time, it's a sniper, the Longbow. It does the exact same thing on that rifle, it increases the headshot damage. So it's great for opening up on a squad. The Longbow is a DMR that uses heavy ammo. It's got only a magazine size of 5 by default, but a body shot can do 55 damage and a headshot can do 110. It's basically a long range Wingman. The Longbow is incredibly powerful if you can land successive shots, or even better if you can nail that headshot. If you've got the Skull Piercer, it's extremely deadly. The idea is that if you've got a squad mate who is firing off from a distance, you could then have the other two pushing in closer to stop the enemies from healing. I have to admit that the sniper rifles are an acquired taste in this game. I think a lot of players like to play a bit closer up than longer range because players can often get hit very hard and still regenerate to full shield by the time you get over to them. Nonetheless, the Longbow is an extremely effective gun and one of my favourites. The next weapon that I really love, the Peacekeeper. This shotgun is an absolute monster. It's a lever action shotgun that's got a 6-round magazine. If all of your shotgun pellets land, and depending on range, you can do up to 110 damage to the body and a whopping 165 damage to the head. Of course, you're not always going to land every shot, and even if you do, you're not always going to get every pellet landing, but the Peacekeeper is deadly at close range, and because you can be so mobile and hipfire with it, you can make yourself hard to hit too. Now I think there are one of two ways to use this gun. You either use it to break shield and then switch to something else, or the better way in my experience is to break the enemy shield with either an auto rifle, sniper, or perhaps the Wingman, and then moving close and be aggressive, finish off the enemies with the Peacekeeper before they've got a chance to fall back and heal. Much like a lot of the other guns though, there are attachments that you really want to make this better than its default version, although I think by default it's pretty good. In this case, it's the Precision Choke. What does it do? Well, it reduces the spread of the pellets, and when you have 11 pellets firing off with each shot, that makes a big difference. It kind of changes it into a slug rather than a buckshot. So when this attachment is equipped, the gun charges when you're aiming down the sight and really tightens the spread. So if someone is at longer range, then try that instead if you don't have a chance to switch. The Peacekeeper, ultimately, it's a gun that you want to use up close and personal, either to finish off enemies when you've just depleted their shield, or you just want to push into a building like an absolute mad lad. There's just no other gun that's better at getting in people's faces with, in my opinion. I know what you're thinking, the Mastiff, but like I mentioned before, I'm not talking about gold guns in this video because you'd be crazy to not pick a Mastiff up. One of the weapons that I probably think I slept on a little bit in the first few days, but now is easily one of my favourite guns, is the Prowler PDW. This comes with a big caveat though, and that is that I really only like it if I've got the selective fire hop-up attachment, which allows you to turn the gun from a 5-round burst into full auto. So by default, the Prowler is a burst fire weapon. It's not a triple burst though, 5 rounds like I said, and to be fair, it can be effective early game if you manage to land all of those shots, because if all 5 rounds hit your target, you can do 70 damage with those shots. Where it really comes into its own though is when you've got that selective fire attachment and you can turn it into a full auto weapon. The reason it's so effective is because it's the only SMG/PDW in the game that uses heavy rounds. So if this thing is full auto and you're on target with your tracking, it absolutely shreds people. But to use it to its full potential, you'd also need to get the extended mag. And just like with the Wingman, the rarer the extended mag, the more rounds that you can have. Not only that, but the rare and epic extended mags also improve reload time too. Moving on, let's talk auto weapons for a minute, and arguably the best all-around gun in the game. The R301 assault rifle, for me, it's definitely the best assault rifle in the game. It uses light ammo compared to the Flatline, which uses heavy, but the R301 has the benefit of being a laser beam. It's just so incredibly accurate, and the recoil is very easy to control. Now it only has 18 rounds in the mag by default, so you've really got to find the highest rarity of extended mag you can get to make the most of it. The gun is incredibly accurate anyway, but if you can get a hold of a stock, it becomes even better. The standard stock improved the handling of the gun and reduces the aim drift when you're firing. The better the stock, the bigger the improvement. You can also equip a barrel stabilizer. Again, the better the rarity, the more it's going to do for you, and a stabilizer reduces the recoil of this gun. So when you've got a gun that already has very little recoil, you can imagine how good it is when it's got full attachments. A fully kitted out R301 will shred enemies if you can track them well. You've just got to hold mouse 1, keep strafing left and right, keep your aim on the target. Now it only does around 14 damage to the body with each shot, but because the rate of fire is around 720, you can just chunk people with this thing. The R301, if you see it, pick it up. Now we'll briefly talk about LMGs too. I'm not a huge fan of the LMGs in the game, but they can be quite good when fully kitted out. The Spitfire is a really strong LMG, but in my opinion, you really got to get the stock and the barrel stabilizer to make it a good choice over, let's say, what we just talked about, the R301. The Devotion is another very strong LMG, but only if you've got the hop-up attachment for it called the Turbocharger. The problem with the Devotion is that when it's fully spooled, it's actually really good, but it does take a few seconds to get there. And in a jam, you could have already taken too much damage. If you were using another gun, you could have put that damage out instead. The Gold Turbocharger reduces that spool or spin up time significantly, making it more viable. And if you've got that in a close range firefight, there's not much that will beat it. That being said, I don't like to use the Devotion that much because it uses energy ammo, one of only 2 guns in the game to do so at the moment. And as such, I find that ammo type to be a bit more of a pain to get hold of, and I just tend to not pick up the Devotion that much unless I really need to. Now there is another fast firing gun that we haven't touched on, but we absolutely have to, and that's the R99 SMG. It's one of the fastest firing guns in the game with a whopping 1080 rounds per minute. So if you land all of your shots at 13 damage for a body hit and 18 for a headshot, you're going to ruin someone's day. It's really good in hipfire too. The issue with the R99 though, and to be honest, a lot of guns have this in the game, is that are you really going to land all of your shots? The nature of Apex is that players are constantly ADAD strafing, moving, and usually moving quite fast. Inevitably, you're going to miss a few bullets, and with only 18 rounds in the mag, you can't really afford to do that. As with the R301, you really need the extended mag here. I haven't really touched on this, but this leaves you in an interesting spot. If you find an extended mag for a light weapon, do you hold on to it even if you don't have a light gun taking up an inventory space, but knowing there's a gun that you'd like to use it on if you find it? Or what if you find an R99 or an R301? Do you keep it hoping that you might find a light mag to make it more useful? Same with the Prowler really. I'm not a huge fan of it in burst fire, but if you want to use it in full auto, you need to perhaps make an early decision in the game if you're going to hold on to it, or drop it for another gun. It leaves you with an interesting decision there, and I like that about the design of the game. So back to the R99, with the extended mag, this gun really does ruin people up close. The downside, I suppose, is that compared to the 301, you're going to lose a lot of range. The R99 is deadly, but only when you close that gap and get up in people's faces. It is good there, but I feel like the R301 is more versatile at more ranges and dominates short and mid range. There are different weapons too, but if I had the choice over them, I'd probably go for the R301 over the 99 on balance for more distance. But you shouldn't sleep on the R99, it really is very strong. It just boils down to your playstyle really, and maybe what legend that you're playing as too. If you're a wraith and always rushing in and engaging enemies at close range and then escaping, then perhaps the R99 would be a perfect fit for you. Now then, two assault rifles I haven't talked about yet, the Hemlock and the Flatline. The Hemlock is a heavy 3-burst assault rifle. If you land all 3 of those bullets on an enemy, it can do up to 54 damage to the body and 108 to the head, so it really promotes accurate fire. I'd recommend switching the gun to single fire though, honestly, and this is where the gun really comes into its own. On PC, this is quite easy. I don't know how difficult it would be on console, but in single fire mode, you can tap away at your heart's content, and it does a lot of damage. 18 damage for a body shot doesn't sound like an awful lot, but when you can fire it super fast, with very little trigger delay, it actually becomes viable. You perhaps don't have much versatility at closer ranges, but you can still take enemies out, especially with headshots, so don't disregard the Hemlock. I would say the same for the Flatline as well. I think it's a good gun, very strong, but I personally usually swap the Flatline out for the R301 given the chance. The Flatline packs a punch, but it just doesn't have the accuracy of the R301 over range. The 301 also fires at 720 rounds per minute and the Flatline's around 600. This is not to say that the Flatline is bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's more of a preference thing. The gun still does 16 damage with a body shot and 32 with a headshot, so it's okay. The Hemlock can be upgraded with a stock magazine and a barrel, whereas the Flatline has no option for a barrel to reduce recoil, so a bit more difficult to handle. Okay then, wrapping things up, let's talk about sniper rifles. I think sniping in Apex is a very good way to take enemy shields at range, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. Apex, I think, rewards aggression quite a lot more, and so sniping from a distance is not always that useful when players can easily regenerate health and shield behind cover. That being said, there are quite a few useful snipers in the game for those players with good aim, and if you can make sure that you knock someone if you're engaging them at distance, this can give you an advantage in a squad fight. So the two best snipers in my opinion are the G7 Scout and, like I mentioned earlier, the longbow. The G7 uses light ammo and as such does 20 damage to the body and 60 with a headshot. So if you're accurate with the G7 and the fact that it's really got no trigger delay, it can actually deplete someone's health and armor really fast from a good distance away. I prefer to use the G7 at medium distance rather than extreme or short. At medium, if your tracking's on point, you can just tear people with clicking the trigger fast. It's a very accurate gun, and sometimes it feels kind of like the Hemlock in single fire mode, except it does more damage with each hit. And you can equip barrels, extended mags and stocks to improve the handling, which of course are all straight upgrades. The G7 can actually be devastating in the right hands. Now the one sniper that we haven't talked about is the triple take. I'm a little bit on the fence about this one because I do think it's a strong gun, but I'm not convinced that I would take it over the longbow or the G7 in most situations. The triple take is an energy weapon that fires off 3 rounds when you shoot. Without the precision choke though, you can't charge up your shot to group them together, and so it makes the weapon way less viable. It's kind of bad in my opinion. One shot to the body only does 23 damage, so you really need all 3 shots to hit at once, and to be fair, if you land a triple take headshot, it does do up to 138 damage, which is a lot, but I think that you really need the choke on it for it to be viable. You aim in, you wait a couple seconds, and then you get it all in one shot. Without it, I just wouldn't pick this thing up. The other issue is the same as I mentioned earlier. It uses energy ammo, although with a sniper, arguably you need a lot less, so maybe it's not as much of an issue as it is with the Devotion. Now that isn't all of the guns in the game. I've left a lot of them out, the Mozambique, the Auto Shotty, because honestly I just don't think they're that good. And there's a couple of the light pistols that you might get early game to just pick up and get a kill with them, but I wouldn't seriously consider using them over any of the others that I've just mentioned here. So there you have it, those are my best weapons in Apex. One of the things that impressed me with Apex is that there really isn't that one and done gun, the God gun. There are multiple weapons that you can use depending on your playstyle. You could go for a fully decked out R301 with a G7 or a Wingman and a Peacekeeper. There are lots of viable options here, but even still a few guns definitely do stand out as being stronger than others in my opinion. So there we have it guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What's your favourite weapon setup in Apex? And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.